Oliver Penn hadn't expected to save a stranger's life that morning, let alone a woman who'd turn his world upside down. "Daddy, can I go feed the ducks?" his 7-year-old son, Theo, asked, holding up the crumpled bag of bread crusts they'd brought from home. "Of course, buddy. But stay where I can see you," Oliver said, adjusting the faded baseball cap on his head as he scanned the quiet stretch of Riverside Park. It was their Saturday ritual. Theo got to run wild, and Oliver got to breathe. Raising a kid alone wasn't easy, especially when your bank account barely had enough to get through the week. He settled on a bench, watching Theo skip toward the pond. The sun peeked through the clouds, and for a moment things felt peaceful. Then a scream tore through the air. Oliver was on his feet in seconds, sprinting toward the sound. Near the bike path, a woman had collapsed. People froze, staring, but no one stepped forward. He dropped to his knees. "Call an ambulance!" he barked, checking her pulse. There wasn't one. Without hesitation, he started CPR. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. Again. His hands trembled, but his mind was focused. Come on, he muttered. After what felt like forever, she gasped loud and sharp and coughed violently. Oliver rolled her gently onto her side, relief crashing over him. She blinked slowly, her eyes dazed. What happened?" "You fainted. You weren't breathing. But you're okay now." She stared at him, her chest still rising and falling fast. "You saved me?" He nodded. "Yeah. I guess I did." The ambulance arrived minutes later, and Oliver stepped back as the EMTs swarmed her. Theo ran up, eyes wide. "Is she okay, Daddy?" "She will be," Oliver said, watching as her eyes locked on his one last time before she was lifted into the ambulance. She looked at him like she wanted to say something, like she didn't want to go. And then she was gone. 3 days later, Oliver still couldn't get her out of his head. It wasn't just that he'd saved her life. It was the way her eyes had lingered on his. The way she'd looked at him like he was more than a stranger kneeling in the dirt. He was finishing a shift at the auto shop when Theo came running back from the front office. "Daddy! There's a fancy lady here asking for you." Oliver wiped his hands on a rag and stepped out, expecting maybe a customer. What he saw made his breath hitch. It was her. The woman from the park. Only now she stood tall in a sleek navy dress, heels that probably cost more than his rent, and a diamond necklace that glittered beneath her coat. Her dark brown hair was pulled into a perfect twist, and her makeup looked like it came from a magazine shoot. She was stunning, and completely out of place in a greasy garage. "Hi," she said softly, her voice steadier than the last time he heard it. "I'm looking for the man who saved my life." Oliver blinked. "That'd be me." Her lips curled into a smile. "I hope so." "I didn't catch your name," he said, wiping his hands again out of habit. "Madelyn Jennings," she offered, extending her hand. He shook it cautiously. "I'm Oliver. And this," he glanced behind him, "is my son, Theo." Madelyn crouched to Theo's level. "Hey, superhero. I hear your dad's a real-life lifesaver." Theo beamed. "He's the best one there is." She stood again, turning back to Oliver. "I wanted to thank you." "Properly. You already did by breathing again," he said with a shrug. Madelyn laughed, a soft, genuine sound. "No, I mean it. You didn't have to step in. But you did. Most people would have just watched. I couldn't just stand there." "I know. That's why I'm here." He scratched the back of his neck. "I don't really know what to say. Would you let me take you and Theo to dinner? Anywhere you want." "Oh, that's..." He hesitated, glancing at his oil-stained shirt. "I don't think we're exactly dressed for fancy." Madelyn tilted her head. "I'm not asking for fancy. I'm asking for real." Oliver studied her, this woman who looked like she belonged on a yacht, not in a mechanic's garage. She didn't seem like she was putting on a show. She was just looking at him. "All right," he said slowly. "Dinner sounds good." That night, they met at a quiet Italian place near the river. Madelyn had changed into jeans and a simple blouse, but she still looked like $1,000,000, no, $1 billion. She watched Oliver closely as he helped Theo cut his spaghetti, as he asked the waiter for extra napkins, as he laughed when his son made a face at the Parmesan. She didn't say much at first. But as the night went on, she opened up. "My company's based in Midtown," she said between sips of wine. "We do international investments. Real estate. Philanthropy. It's a lot." "Sounds like it," Oliver said. "And stressful. It wasn't always like this. My parents built the business, and I inherited the throne, I guess." He raised an eyebrow. "So you're like a billionaire?" She smiled. "Yes." He blinked. "Huh. That's it? Just huh? I mean, I already saw you walk into a garage in heels and pearls." "I figured you weren't exactly hurting for cash." She laughed again, more freely this time. "You really are something else. And you're full of surprises," he said. Theo tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can we have dessert?" Madelyn leaned in. "Get whatever you want, Theo. My treat." After dessert, as Theo dozed off beside him in the booth, Oliver looked at her. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." "Why?" "Because I haven't stopped thinking about you. About that moment in the park when I opened my eyes and saw your face. I was terrified, but then I wasn't." He swallowed hard. "Madelyn, I know this is fast. I know we're from different worlds. But I don't care. You saved my life. And now I want to know what it feels like to live it with someone real." He stared at her, heart pounding. And somewhere deep inside, something cracked open. Something he hadn't let himself feel in a long time. Hope. Real, terrifying, beautiful hope. And it started with CPR in a park. Oliver hadn't planned to see her again so soon. But 5 days later, she showed up at the school parking lot just as he was picking Theo up. She didn't wave. Didn't call out. Just leaned against the hood of a sleek obsidian car, watching him with a look he couldn't quite read. He walked over cautiously, Theo's hand in his. "You following me now?" Oliver asked, half joking. Madelyn's lips parted. "Your son left this in my car." She held out a small plastic dinosaur, one of Theo's favorites. Its tail was missing, worn down from years of being clutched tightly during bedtime stories. Theo gasped. "Milo!" He grabbed the toy and hugged it like it was a living thing. Oliver blinked. "You drove all the way here for that?" "I didn't want him to think it was gone forever." She glanced down at Theo, who was now poking the dinosaur's nose into his coat pocket. "Some things matter more than they look." Oliver exhaled slowly. "Thank you." Before she could respond, a bell rang from the school building, and a crowd of children poured out. A few parents glanced toward Madelyn's expensive car, but she didn't seem to notice. "Can I take you both somewhere?" she asked, eyes lifting to meet his. Oliver hesitated. "Where?" "There's a spot I go when I need to breathe." "I think you'll like it." He looked at Theo, who was already nodding eagerly. "Only if it's not some place with cloth napkins and a wait list." She cracked a grin. "I promise. No linen in sight." They drove 30 minutes upstate, past the city's edge, until the skyline gave way to trees and winding roads. The air felt different out here, less like concrete and more like sky. They parked at a private overlook, a clearing with a view of the Hudson stretching wide and silver beneath the afternoon light. A single wooden swing hung from an old oak, creaking gently in the breeze. "How do you know about this place?" Oliver asked as Theo ran ahead. "My grandfather used to bring me here when I was little," Madelyn said, stepping onto the grass. "Before everything got so loud." They stood in silence for a moment, watching Theo launch his dinosaur into imaginary battle near the tree roots. "You didn't say much about your family the other night," Oliver said, folding his arms. "They're complicated." He raised a brow. "My father built the company from the ground up. But after he passed, the board didn't think I could handle it. I've spent years proving them wrong. Sounds exhausting. It is. She glanced at him. But I've never told anyone that before. Oliver bent to pick up a twig Theo had dropped. Why me? Because you don't want anything from me. He looked at her then. Really looked. You're wrong, he said quietly. I want answers. She tilted her head. To what? What happens when this thing between us stops being a novelty? When the woman with the private driver and the diamond necklace realizes the guy with oil under his nails doesn't fit into her world. Madelyn didn't flinch. I'm not looking for someone to fit my world. I'm trying to find someone I'd want to build a new one with. His breath caught. Theo called out from the swing. Daddy, push me! Oliver walked over, gave the swing a gentle shove, and watched his son's laughter soar into the wind. When he turned back, Madelyn was sitting in the grass, her shoes tossed aside, toes curling into the earth like she belonged there. He joined her, lowering himself beside her. Do you ever think about quitting? He asked. Every other day. Then why don't you? She picked up a leaf and twisted it absent-mindedly. Because I'm scared I'd lose myself if I walked away. Everything I've done, every deal, every meeting, it's all been about proving I'm enough. He nodded slowly. I get that. You do? I've worked 3 jobs at once. I've eaten crackers for dinner more times than I can count. But I still feel like I'm failing sometimes. Like I'm always 2 steps behind. She turned to him, her expression softening. You're not behind, she said. You're raising a good kid. You're showing up every day. That's more than most people do. He let the words sink in, unsure how to respond. Theo eventually wore himself out, and they drove back as the sun dipped low, casting gold over the horizon. When they pulled up to Oliver's building, a narrow walk-up with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox, Madelyn didn't say anything. She just looked at him, then at Theo, who was asleep in the back seat, clutching Milo in one hand. I don't want this to end, she said, voice low. It doesn't have to, Oliver said. I leave for Geneva tomorrow. For a shareholder summit. How long? 3 weeks. He nodded slowly. That's a long time. I want to see you when I get back. Are you sure? He asked. I've never been more sure of anything. He stepped out of the car, opened the back door, and lifted Theo gently into his arms. Madelyn rolled down her window. Oliver? He looked back. Don't disappear on me. He didn't answer. He just nodded, then carried his son up the steps, Milo dangling from Theo's hand like a promise waiting to be kept. 3 weeks. Each day passed like sand dragging through a funnel, slow, uneven, and impossible to speed up. Oliver had never realized how much silence could ache until the quiet of Madelyn's absence began to settle into him like fog. He didn't tell anyone about her. Not the guys at the shop, not the neighbors who asked where he'd been disappearing to in the evenings. It was too impossible, too fragile to risk putting into words. But every night after Theo was tucked in, Oliver found himself staring at the ceiling, remembering the way her eyes had softened when she let her heels sink into the grass. The way she looked at him like she already knew what he was going to say before he said it. 2 days after she returned, she showed up again. But this time, she didn't come to the shop or the school or the park. She came to his door. Oliver opened it, still wearing the faded t-shirt he'd slept in, one sock on, Theo's cereal bowl in his hand. She stood in the hallway holding a large paper bag. I brought breakfast. Hope you like croissants. He blinked. You remembered. Her mouth curved slightly. And I brought enough for Theo. He stepped aside without a word. Inside, the apartment was small, 2 rooms, a kitchen that barely fit 2 people, and a couch that doubled as his bed most nights. But it was clean, warm, and filled with signs of life. Crayon drawings taped to the fridge. A tiny basketball hoop hanging on the closet door. A stack of library books on the coffee table. Madelyn didn't glance around. She walked straight to the kitchen, unpacked the bag, and set out the pastries like she'd done it 100 times. Geneva was brutal, she said as she handed him a napkin. 3 14-hour days, 5 investor meetings, and 1 very awkward opera. He took a bite of the croissant, then paused. You don't actually like opera? I hate it, she said, grinning. I just pretend I do because the donors keep inviting me. Theo patted in, rubbing his eyes, and paused when he saw her. You came back. I told you I would, she said, kneeling. I even brought you a chocolate one. He climbed into her lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Oliver watched her hold his son, and felt something shift inside him, something dangerous. Because it wasn't just attraction anymore. It was something deeper. Something terrifying. Later, after Theo had gone to school, they sat on the fire escape with mugs of coffee balanced on the rusted railing. I want to show you something, Madelyn said, reaching into her coat pocket. She handed him a folded piece of paper. He opened it carefully. It was a sketch. A building. Clean lines, big windows, a sign that read, Hudson Community Center. I bought the lot last year, she said. It was supposed to be a cold storage facility, but I changed my mind. He studied the drawing. What made you change it? You did. He looked up sharply. You told me once you always felt 2 steps behind. That stuck with me, she said, her voice quieter now. There are a lot of people out there who feel the same way. I want to build a place where they don't have to. You're serious. I want you to help me run it. He stared at her. Madelyn, I change tires for a living. You guide your kid through life with more grace than most CEOs I've met. You solve problems without throwing money at them. And you saved my life. I think that qualifies you for more than lug nuts and invoices. He gripped the railing. This is insane. Maybe. But I'm not asking you to decide right now. I just want you to think about what it would look like to build something that matters. He turned the paper over in his hands. The sketch was detailed. Real. Not just an idea but a plan. Why are you doing this? He asked. She leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Because you changed me, Oliver. And I don't want to go back to who I was before. He couldn't look at her. Not yet. That afternoon, he dropped Theo off at a neighbor's, then took the subway downtown. He needed air. Space. Answers. He ended up on the steps of the church where he'd once married Theo's mother, a woman who had walked away 2 years later and never looked back. He hadn't been inside since. Now he slid into a pew, staring at the stained glass until his eyes blurred. He didn't pray. He just sat. When he got home, Madelyn was waiting outside his building. He walked up slowly. I went for a walk. You were gone for 5 hours. I needed time. She didn't respond. He stepped closer. You scare the hell out of me. Because I'm rich? No. Because you're real. And I'm not used to people staying. She reached out, fingers grazing his. I'm not going anywhere, Oliver. But I can't stand still, either. I need to keep moving forward. I want you with me. He exhaled. Then tell me what that looks like. Not just dreams. Reality. Her hand tightened around his. Then come with me. Tonight. There's something I need you to see. He hesitated. I can't leave Theo. I already called Ms. Ramirez across the hall. She said she'd be happy to keep him for the night. He's with her now. He blinked. You thought I'd say yes? I hoped. He followed her down the stairs and into the waiting car. They drove in silence until the skyline began to change. The buildings grew taller. Shinier. The streets cleaner. Quieter. She leaned toward the driver. Glasshouse tower. Oliver turned to her. That's where you live. Top floor. The car pulled into a private underground garage. An elevator opened with a keycard swipe, and within moments, they were stepping into a 2-story penthouse with glass walls and a view that stretched from the river to the sea. It wasn't just a home. It was another world. He stood frozen just past the threshold. She turned to face him. This is where I sleep. Where I cry. Where I sit on the floor with a glass of wine and question everything I've ever built. It's not a fortress. It's a cage. And I'm handing you the key. Oliver stepped forward, heart hammering. Why me? Because you're the only person who's ever seen me without all of this, she whispered. And still wanted to know more. He reached for her then, not just out of desire, but out of something raw and hungry and terrifying. She didn't flinch. She moved into him like she'd been waiting her whole life for that exact moment. And Oliver knew, as her hands slid up his chest and her breath warmed his neck, that everything he believed about where he belonged was about to change forever. Oliver stood with bare feet against the cool marble floor of Madelyn's penthouse, the city glittering behind her like a backdrop from a dream he wasn't supposed to have. But she was real. And so was the way she was looking at him, like this wasn't a fantasy, but a beginning. He hadn't planned to stay the night. But after hours of quiet conversation on the balcony, after the kind of closeness that didn't need explanation, the sun had risen to find him still beside her, her head resting against his shoulder as if it had always belonged there. He hadn't slept much. Not from discomfort, but from the weight of everything that had shifted between them. When she stirred next to him, her voice was groggy. You're still here. I wasn't gonna leave without saying something. She sat up slowly, the silk of her robe sliding over her shoulder. Do you regret it? He met her eyes. No. But I'm not gonna pretend I figured it all out either. Madelyn stood and walked to the window, pulling the sheer curtain aside with one hand. I've been thinking about that community center. Oliver rose, stretching his arms. What about it? I want to launch it next month. Quietly. No press. He blinked. That soon? I've already pulled the permits. Hired a project manager. But I want you to run the programs. Decide what actually happens inside the walls. He walked over to her, folding his arms. You're serious? You think I'd invite you into my home and into my life just to keep you on the sidelines? He let out a slow breath. I need time to prep. And childcare. And training on whatever systems you use. I'll cover the training. I'll pay for full-time childcare if you need it. Or Theo can come with you, there'll be a kid's wing. He studied her. You're building a whole wing for him? I'm building it for everyone like him. But yes. He inspired that part. He didn't respond to that. Couldn't. Instead, he reached out and touched her wrist lightly. You're not doing this to fix me, right? Madelyn turned to him. No. I'm doing this because I want to build something with someone who understands what it means to care. You don't just fix engines, Oliver. You fix what people give up on. He looked down. You sure I'm the right person? I've never been more sure of anything. That afternoon, Oliver returned home to find Theo building towers with couch cushions. Ms. Ramirez had left a note on the kitchen counter, along with a plate of empanadas. Did you have fun last night? Oliver asked, ruffling Theo's hair. Yeah. Mess. Ramirez let me stay up past bedtime. Oliver crouched beside him. How would you feel about going to a new place with me? A place with a reading room and art stuff and maybe even a basketball hoop? Theo's eyes lit up. Really? Like a cool place? The coolest, Oliver said. But only if you're okay with it. Can Madelyn come too? Oliver smiled. She'll be there every day. That weekend, Madelyn invited Oliver and Theo to a small gathering at a property she owned just outside the city. It wasn't a party, more like a gathering of people she trusted. Artists, educators, city planners, a retired judge. As they stepped into the garden, Oliver paused at the sight of string lights hanging between trees and a jazz trio playing near a fountain. Are you nervous? Madelyn asked, slipping her hand into his. I've never worn a button-down that wasn't from a thrift store, he muttered. She leaned in. You look better in it than anyone here. They mingled, and for the first time, Oliver didn't feel like an outsider. He talked about ideas for the youth programs, about trade skill training, about how to keep kids from falling through the cracks. People listened. Really listened. Later, as the evening wound down, Madelyn found him alone near the edge of the garden, watching Theo chase fireflies with 2 other children. "I've been thinking about something," she said. He turned toward her, the sunset casting a warm glow over her hair. "I want you to move in." His eyebrows lifted. "You mean permanently?" "I know it's fast. But I don't care. I want to wake up with you. I want Theo to have his own room with a view of the skyline. I want to come home to both of you." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced back at Theo, who was laughing so hard he fell into the grass. Then he looked at her. Really looked. And said, "Okay." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. "You mean it?" "I've never said anything I meant more." 2 months later, the Hudson Community Center opened its doors. Oliver stood at the entrance in a tailored navy suit, another gift he hadn't wanted but had eventually accepted. Inside, the rooms were already filled with laughter and music. There was a reading nook with bean bags, a tech lab, a kitchen where local chefs would teach classes on nutrition. Theo had his own cubby, painted with dinosaurs. Madelyn stood beside Oliver, her hand in his, as they watched the first families walk through the doors. "This is what it looks like," she said softly. "To build something that matters." He turned to her. "No," he said. "This is what it looks like when you stop surviving and start living." She pressed her lips to his, and the world fell away. That evening, after the last visitors had left and the lights dimmed, Oliver knelt in the middle of the quiet main hall and pulled a small velvet box from his coat pocket. Madelyn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as he opened it. "I don't have a yacht. I don't have stock options. But I have a son who loves you, and a heart that's never belonged to anyone else." She dropped to her knees in front of him, tears spilling freely. "Is that a yes?" She threw her arms around him. "Yes. To all of it." Outside the windows, the skyline shimmered. Inside, a family was being built not from a bank account, but from the kind of love that saves lives. Just like that morning in the park, when a poor dad gave CPR to a stranger, and found the woman who'd save him right back. 3 weeks after Oliver proposed, the city saw its first snow of the season. While most of Manhattan groaned under the weight of icy sidewalks and delayed trains, the penthouse above Glass House Tower transformed into a warm cocoon of white lights and cinnamon-scented air. Theo had declared it the most Christmas-y place ever, and Oliver couldn't argue. Between the thick garlands draped along the staircase and the enormous spruce glowing in the corner of the living room, it felt like a world apart from any December he'd known before. Madelyn stood at the kitchen island with a recipe card in one hand and flour dusting her cheekbone. "This says fold gently?" "What does that even mean?" she asked, narrowing her eyes at the mound of dough in front of her. "It means don't stir it like you're fighting someone," Oliver said, walking over with Theo on his hip. "I'm not fighting it. I'm coaxing it." Theo leaned toward the bowl. "Can I coax it too?" "You can help me add the chocolate chips," she said, moving aside for him. Oliver set Theo on the stool, watching as his small fingers carefully pressed the chips into the dough like it was an art project. "He takes baking way more seriously than I ever did," he said. "He already told me he's going to be a chef, engineer, astronaut," Madelyn said, grinning. "Ambitious. I like it." She turned to him, brushing flour from her hands. "Speaking of ambition," she said carefully, "I got a call from the board." Oliver's posture stiffened slightly. "What now?" "They want me to take the Jennings Foundation fully private. No more shareholders, no more quarterly performance reports. Just me, a mission, and the freedom to do things the way I want." His brows lifted. "You're walking away from billions in investor capital. I'm walking towards something better. Legacy. Purpose. Control." He studied her face, the way her chin lifted slightly when she said it, the calm in her eyes. You already decided. I did. But I wanted you to know what it means. Which is, I won't be flying to Geneva or Shanghai every other week. I won't be giving speeches to people who don't listen. I'll be here. With you. With Theo. With the center. Oliver looked at her for a long moment. You're sure you're not doing this for me? She reached for his hand. I'm doing it because of you. There's a difference. That night, after Theo fell asleep beneath a mountain of blankets and stuffed animals, Oliver and Madelyn curled up on the couch beside the tree, the fire casting a soft glow across their faces. I met with the architect yesterday, he said, his voice low. For the expansion? Yeah. We're adding a rooftop garden. Her eyes went wide. Seriously? Kids can grow their own vegetables, learn to cook them in the kitchen. We'll partner with the local schools. Madelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. You were born to do this. I just needed someone to believe I could. She wrapped her arm around him. I never doubted it. The next morning, Oliver woke to find Theo standing beside the bed, holding a wrinkled envelope. Are you gonna marry Madelyn soon? He asked. Oliver sat up slowly. Why do you ask, Bud? Because I want her to be my real mom. Not just in the house. For real. He took the envelope and opened it, revealing a drawing of the three of them in front of the community center. Madelyn had a crown. Oliver had a cape. Theo had wings. I think we can make that happen, he said. The wedding took place in the main hall of the Hudson Community Center, under strings of paper lanterns and hand-cut banners made by the kids who came every week. Madelyn wore a simple off-white dress that floated as she walked, and Oliver wore a navy suit with a tiny dinosaur pin on the lapel. Theo's contribution. They were married by the same retired judge who had donated the first 1,000 books to the center's library. Theo stood between them, holding the rings. When the vows were exchanged, Madelyn's voice didn't waver. I spent my whole life building walls of glass. But you taught me how to open the windows, let the air in, and build something real. Oliver took her hands. You saved my life the day I saved yours. And I'll spend every day after this making sure you never forget how much that means. There were no cameras. No press. Just laughter, music, and the kind of joy that didn't need an audience. Afterward, as Theo darted between tables with a cupcake in each hand, Oliver and Madelyn stood near the entrance, watching the sun dip below the skyline through the tall windows. Do you think it'll last? She asked quietly. He turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Not just last, he said. It'll grow. She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her as the city turned gold outside. 6 months later, the rooftop garden bloomed with tomatoes, basil, and wildflowers. Theo had organized a space camp for the younger kids, complete with cardboard helmets and glitter-covered rockets. Oliver taught a workshop on engine repair, and Madelyn hosted a panel for young women in business, her heels kicked off under the table. Their days were full. Their home was loud. Their love was steady. And for once, neither of them was running. They had found something stronger than money, deeper than luck. A life built on choices. A future they shaped together. And they never looked back.